So the first thing I want to talk about is the blindness spectrum. And I know a lot of people know what I'm about to say, but to be honest, this particular part is going to be beneficial for the mainstream audience, okay? So, blindness is not all or nothing. It runs on a spectrum. And I like to talk about the blindness spectrum in 4 major categories, right? There's total, which, and of course there are more nuances to this, but, just for simplicity's sake, there's totally blind, which means no light perception, no useful vision, nothing. One moment. Okay, there we go. Some brief murder there. A lot of sighted folk think of total blindness as seeing darkness, and that's not what it is. Seeing black indicates that you can see at all. And if you can see black, that means that you're not out, that you're not totally blind, right? It's hard to describe what seeing nothing is, but that is the case. People who are totally blind literally can't even see black. It's not something that registers. Above that in the spectrum, we've got light perception, which just means you can detect that light and sometimes shadows exist at all. You can't see colors, you can't really see details.
Said,
there's really
people ask me what it is
a
like.
whole lot nothing
I say
useful.
try seeing through your hand.
It's not even like seeing through your hand to see nothing, because seeing through your hand assumes you can see it all. Light perception, you can tell if a light is on in the room sometimes. You can discern shadows, but that's not even always guaranteed. Oh my goodness. Next, we've got low partial, which is kind of where I sit on the spectrum. I can see very low detail. I can tell flat colors. I can see lights. I can see shadows. I'm very low on detail though. If I fall off of this thing one more time, I have very specific conditions in which I can game. It's got to be dark in the room. I have to have a TV with a lot of contrast. I have to have a pretty big TV close to my face on a mount that I can adjust depending on what I'm looking at. Moving on from what I can see, because I can sit here all day and try and describe it. I'm tired of breaking my legs. Alright, so then there's the top of the spectrum, which is
Mid-evolved.
high partial,
Said,
pretty much.
I'm just vibing today.
You can read larger print. You can navigate without a mobility device. You can see a lot more, but not quite fully, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you guys, but describing blindness has always been a struggle for me. But the reason that I mention this is because different levels of blindness require different accommodations. So, for example, in the context of making games accessible, for someone who's mid to high partial, the only thing that they may need is some good contrast, maybe some large print, maybe a little bit of screen reader access, and of course there are going to be exceptions to this.
Said,
they'll be able to play.
It makes sense to me.
That's what a lot of people do not understand when talking about different levels of blindness, making things accessible. It can be very, very challenging, right? The next thing that I want to talk about is something that was brought up during the Disability Pride Month stream on the Xbox Twitch channel earlier this week, right? Because it is Disability Pride Month, which is why I'm having this stream today with you guys. So, invisible disabilities. I don't quite understand what it is like to have an invisible disability, because at least unless you are extremely high partial and don't need a mobility device such as a cane or a guide dog to navigate, it can be possible to hide your disability if you choose to. Keyword, if you choose to. Now, for certain people and certain disabilities, this can be a bad thing, from what I understand. But at least, in my opinion, from a blind person's perspective, it's hard when people do not know that you have a disability. And the reason that is because, say you're somewhere unfamiliar and you need some assistance finding something, or you're going for a position and you need people to know that you need accommodations or whatever. It can be useful for them to know what your disability is. But I have a very different perspective on this, and it may be a little controversial in the disability community, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I would love it if my disability were invisible. And there is a very good reason for that. At least for me and a lot of the blind people that I know, if we are in a situation like, say, we're interviewing for a job,
Amy Hardwick,
right?
said, I always tried to hide my disability because people treated me like I was dumb because of it.
Say I'm trying to do something like interview for a job. If people know right off the bat that I have a disability, they're not going to take me seriously. 9 times out of 10, I will not be taken seriously in a job interview if they know right off the bat that I am blind, period. And I know hundreds, dare I say thousands, of blind people who have had this same experience. I also know folk who are a lot higher on the blindness spectrum, and they've told me that if it's possible for them to hide their blindness in an interview, they 100% do. Because, and I'm going to speak for the majority of disabled folk here, and I try not to do that very often, but I'd like to think that if you're going for a job interview, or, you know, you're trying to be taken seriously for something, you want to lead with your abilities and qualifications first. You don't want to be seen as a liability. You don't want to be seen as a charity case. You don't want people to feel sorry for you. You don't want people to have pity for you. You want to be taken seriously for the things that you are capable of doing. Period. That's it. Now, of course, there are going to be exceptions to this rule. I know there are going to be exceptions to this rule. But out of all of, I think that's it for the pillars. Out of all of the blind people I know, at least, if they could hide their disability in the interview, they would love to. And of course, there are going to be some outliers. Ooh, it's storming outside.
I used to try to hide my blindness, even when I was at the blind school. I've gotten turned away from apartments and stuff because I happened to have my cane with me at the time.
Exactly! Exactly, man. It's unfortunate, but you will be surprised what kind of opportunities you lose depending on what disability you have and how prominent it is. It's super unfortunate. When I was on the stream on Tuesday, I really enjoyed listening to people talk about their experiences with invisible disabilities. But in the background, I didn't want to be a killjoy, so I didn't say this. In the background, I was just like, gosh, I wish my disability were invisible. You guys have no idea. I'm not trying to belittle your struggles, but gosh, I wish that my disability were invisible sometimes. Oh my gosh. You have no idea how many opportunities I've lost, how many people haven't taken me seriously, how many times I've had to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, 4 times as hard as my fully abled counterparts just to get the same qualifications and accolades they get. I wish I could hide my disability. I really do. But, you know, I don't want to say that in the context of other people saying that they wish folk knew about their disabilities more, because I fully opened my mind up to the idea that it could be
I remember being back
useful.
in college, people would actively avoid walking next to me when I used my cane.
Yes.
So I kept it hidden most of the time so I didn't have to feel like I was the odd one out.
I feel that because in high school, I felt like a freak for using my cane. I didn't want to do it. I did not want to do it at all costs. I really didn't. Because for some reason, people treat blindness like it's contagious. I don't know why, but people treat it like it's contagious. Like if they stand too close, they're gonna catch the blind. I didn't want to take away from any of the stories or experiences of the other people on the stream, but in the back of my mind, I was just like, gosh, I wish nobody noticed me sometimes. I wish I could just blend in with the crowd. I really do. What I want to talk about next is how difficult it is to make a game accessible the farther down the blindness spectrum you go. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to say that people who have less vision need more help, okay? So please don't cancel me for that. That is not what I'm saying. The mods that I'm using to make the game I'm playing, Minecraft, accessible, for me, for example, they were built from a perspective that is a bit higher on the blindness spectrum. I'm not quite high partial, but I do have some vision to use. And the people who are lower on the blindness spectrum than I am, they really struggle with this game. They really struggle. And that is because the less information you can absorb with your vision, the more information has to be conveyed in other ways. I really don't have any scaffolding left, do I? And with a game that is procedurally generated, with a game that has over 400 unique items, with a game that, you know, has a feature where each world is different from the next, so you can't really memorize much. In a game where you're placing blocks on a 3-dimensional space, how do you convey all of that information to someone who cannot see it? How do you convey that information in a way that does not overwhelm the player with information? It's really hard. It's really hard to work out the balance. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I wanted to preface this by saying, just because you have less sight doesn't mean you need more help. It just means you need more information conveyed to you, right? And so when I talk to developers, and when other people talk to developers, that's what we have to worry about.
Dimensionality is a problem.
Yes, dimensionality is a huge problem. Because when I'm talking to other blind people who cannot see as much as me, the thing that they worry about the most is, I'm used to playing 2D games because I only have to worry about 2 axes. How can I keep track of a third while keeping track of everything else in the world without getting overwhelmed?
I actually struggle a little more with Minecraft than I used to since I switched to PC. I don't have a monitor, so I use my TV instead.
I'm using a TV as well.
It's great for a lot of things, but a little too big.
I'm using a TV as well. I'm using a 32-inch right now.
The issue then becomes that the information becomes too complex to explain it all, and even if you do code it in a way that gives all possible information, will take longer to give that information.
Exactly, Tater. Exactly.
Totally blind people do struggle with this game even with full TDS. Especially if directional mods won't work properly.
And I understand. I understand that. I do.
I've seen games use sound to indicate depth and movement in space, but there's only one layer sound can exist on, where visual is 2 or 3 dimensional.
The next topic is definitely going to ruffle some feathers. I know it is. When I said I wanted nothing more than to hide my blindness, it's not because I am ashamed of the fact that I am blind. I'm not ashamed of it, because I personally think I and a lot of other people have been able to live pretty accomplished lives despite this. I said that because I wanted equal access to opportunity based on my skill set and qualifications. But this leads into something else I wanted to talk about. The reason that I mentioned that I am not ashamed of my disability,
it looks cool,
is
but the perspective is super far away from the player character.
I want to talk about feel-good terms for blindness. I want to talk about those. Because if you look at blindness from a medical and legal perspective, no matter where you are on the spectrum, legally and medically, you are blind. But a lot of people have come up with all of these different terms to represent blindness. Visually challenged, visually impaired.
Terraria is an action-oriented building game like Minecraft.
Things like that, you know. And I'm not going to say that everybody uses these terms to minimize their level of disability.
One thing good. I hate being called visually impaired. I hate it. It's what my parents call me, it's what doctors call me, just call it what it is, blind.
Exactly, Amy. There's no shame in being blind. There's no shame in it. If you are going to put forth the effort to learn how to live life just like everybody else, you need to own it. Own the fact that you are blind. Do not be ashamed of that term, because if you wear it with confidence, you can approach blindness topics with confidence. And most of the people who came up with these quote-unquote feel-good terms
Mackenzie Brown
aren't even blind.
Said, "Oh, I like your little macro pad over there. I dig it.
Thank you. This is called a stream deck. I don't quite understand why people are ashamed of their disability. Because, yes, it introduces challenges into life. I get that. It makes things extremely hard. It makes things extremely challenging. I get that. A lot of people I know have gone through varying lengths to make sure
Heather,
they can keep
said,
up and live fulfilling lives.
what if visually impaired simply means that the individual has some sight? Sam is partially sighted.
Well, you know, I personally think that there are situations where that is the case, where you're using it to describe where you sit on the blindness spectrum, but the majority of what I have experienced is that it is
Amy
a
Hardwick
minimization term.
Said,
A lot of them are.
I used to be ashamed because I felt so lonely. Before I came here I was such an outcast that I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Now I have a place
Amy.
to belong. So again, thank you.
You do not need to thank me for that. But I appreciate it. A lot of people I know have met blind people who, if you call them blind, I'm not blind, I'm visually impaired, I can see. And they get offended when you actually call them blind. I've seen it so much because you guys may not know the extent of my involvement with advocacy. I have been advocating for the blind for over a decade, 15 years to be exact, right? So I have met thousands
Minival
of blind people from
said,
all over the world.
At Amy Hardwick I feel that so much. Minival
Thousands of them,
said,
right?
hugs.
So, that being said, it's easy to look at things from a, well, I'm just describing how much vision I have standpoint, but for the majority of folk who use those quote-unquote feel-good terms, that's not what they're doing. It's not what they're doing. Right? Some people may have heard this story, but I want to tell it for the video's sake and for the newcomers to the stream, right? So, if you guys didn't know, I am a guide dog user. My dog's in the other room sleeping right now.
Minival said, I used to be that one that'd get mad if I was called blind, TBH. I kinda use legally blind and visually impaired interchangeably when I describe myself now.
So, when I first started working with a dog, I used to live in a very different area of town than I do now, right? And I came across some very troubling individuals. You'll understand why I say troubling in just a minute. So, one day, I was walking out of my apartment and getting ready for work, right? And I hear someone come up from behind me saying, hey, hold on for a second, right? And I figured it's just one of my
Amy
neighbors
Hardwick
wanting to talk to me, and it
said,
was, right?
Kroger is such a good boy.
His name is not Kroger. That's the name of a grocery store. His name is Krieger. But, you know, I just thought it was one of my neighbors wanting to talk to me. It was, but little did I know, he did not just want to talk to me, right? So, this guy comes running up to me while I'm getting ready to head off to the bus stop to get ready for work, and he pulls a big old Bowie knife out of his bag. Now, I noticed this, and the only reason I noticed is because it just happened to be sunny outside, and I saw the sun reflecting off the blade. Don't worry, this story is not about to get tragic or violent or anything. Okay. So, he bends over before I can react and proceeds to start cutting through my dog's harness. Right? It succeeds in cutting through my dog's harness. Right? And I think he expects my dog to run away when he does this. And the reason that I say this is because while he's doing this, and I'm still in so much shock that I can't react, he is accusing me of animal slavery, right? So he expects my dog to run away, and the only thing she does is back away from this man, curl up behind me, and sits down at my feet. And he was genuinely confused because a lot of people think that guide dogs are enslaved, not knowing that they love their work, they have the ability to choose whether they are happy working or not, and the moral of the story is, I called the cops and got him arrested. He was a member of PETA. PETA do not like guide dog handlers whatsoever. They do not like us. They think we are enslaving our dogs. There are actually some blind people who think we are enslaving our dogs. It's insane. It is insane. I just wanted to conclude with that story. There we go. I just wanted to conclude with that story. But yeah, guys, I have gotten through
Amy Hardwick
all of the topics I want to this stream, I think.
You got him arrested?
I did get him arrested.
I have more respect for you now.
I did get him arrested because he could have hurt my dog with that knife. He could have hurt me with that knife. You know, you never know how situations like that can turn out. You really never know.
Said, I was walking in the mall with my mom and a friend of hers, and some dude walked up me and starts waving his arms around going, "Hi, hello, can you see me?"
Man, that is obnoxious. That is straight up obnoxious. I'm sorry. Yeah, guys. Those are all the topics I wanted to cover for the stream. And this is for the recordings purposes. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments.